Water when I'm thirsty. Drink.
What up, everybody?
What's going on?
Welcome to another session. We're getting it in another time. It's the third Friday in November, where we have like two more left for the year.
Yeah.
We here to close out the year. Good water for the thirsty. Where's the word simply? The word refreshing. Tonight we have with us Jerome, Lorraine, Courtney, and Henrik. We're gonna run with this crew um, and talk a little bit about stuff that we read from the book of John. Um, the time period of Ezra and Kendrick's favorite book in the Bible, the Psalms. Yeah, I think we overlap in Jeremiah, Lamentations, Chronicles, Ezra, Haggai. Well, we're getting into Haggai tomorrow anyway, so yeah, we're gonna talk about that. Courtney has a little something for us coming out of John chapter 12. I mean, Luke chapter 12 in relation to John chapter 4, but I'm going to let him unpack that for us.
Oh man, I'm gonna try. I don't know how bad.
It's cleaning up. You're good so far?
All right, it's the the verse in Luke has to do being responsible for what's required of you. So like much will be required of everyone who has been given much, and even more will be expected of the one entrusted with more. So I heard that saw that verse earlier this as I was going through John again, reading tonight. I was listening to and John say um, after he to the Samaritan woman, I have a kind of food you know nothing about. My nourishment comes from doing the will of God who sent me and from finishing his work. So I was just wondering, how does one identify the work that they're supposed to do?
Hmm. That's a good question. That's a good question for the pastor's kid. So I'm going to start with him.
One of the things I like to look at in terms of figuring out your work, sometimes I align work to purpose, although you can have multiple works that are tied to your purpose, your singular purpose. Um, I like to look at where I feel uniquely discontented. So you and I might walk into a room, Courtney, and something will be, it will just really get to me. It would bother me profusely, and you'd just be like, "No big deal, dude." You know, it, maybe it's children in need. Maybe it's men becoming incels or simps. I don't know. Whatever it is, if it's uniquely troubling, bothersome to you, and you feel passionate about correcting or addressing it, that might be an indication. It's probably a good indication that that could be a work for you. Um, the other thing I like to look at is um, how do I say it? It's like very often you'd see, okay, so like we might have a good study, not Mike, we will have a good study tonight, and there'll be things we will learn, and it's like invariably within a day or two I always find myself in a situation where something that we learned and shared and discussed tonight, I'm in a position to share it with somebody in need. And I think what that is it's twofold. It's making sure you're always listening for what the Spirit says, and then when you hear what He says, listening to it and heeding it, right? And I think sometimes we get so caught up with the noise of things around us and whatnot. We're not in a position to really hear what God might be saying, or if God is saying anything. And then if He does say anything, you then need to pick up yourself and act based on what He says. So it's what are the things that uniquely frustrate you, annoy you, you feel, uniquely challenged to address, and then making sure you're always attentive for what He says, and then actually, when He says something, listening to it.
So, using the first definition, I'm gonna lob something back at the court, backhand serve, right? Tell me about that in the case of Hosea. Right? Do you think he had a unique inkling, a
Did he
strong
have a unique
passion,
what?
a unique inkling or a strong passion for
Jesus, let it out.
For sex with
pursuing
prostitutes?
prostitutes and marrying them and calling them back from you know and
Oh,
buying them back.
I don't, I don't know that he
No.
did. He did have a unique passion for the wandering, unfaithful nation of Israel. I don't
You think
even know if
Hosea did?
Do you think he had a passion for that?
You think Hosea did
to
really?
reach them to get their act together. I just don't know that he
I
expected God
I
to,
Mm.
when I look
your
at these guys
ministry to them is gonna be.
when I look at these guys, I don't know if all of them had passions. Um just like I don't think some pastors have passions. I just think, it's I think that there's sometimes it's just obedience. If you're
Mm,
if that's what you're called to do, then you just obey. Whether you like, there's no one that wants to have their wife
being
be a
zero form.
prostitute and getting knocked off and having to go back and buy her. Like,
I'm
there's
just
there's
passionate. I'm
there's
just
nothing
passionate about the
passionate.
prostitutes.
I wouldn't say there's no one, right?
Yeah,
There's always one,
at least. Yeah.
at least. I just don't think that one was Hosea, right? But I think there's a lot about, just when it comes down to it, it's just obedience. Um, and 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 we've talked about it. It's kind of a running thing with us and Water for the Thirsty, and just, the posture. There are things that we enjoy doing, and that we would probably prefer to do, that some of us wish wouldn't do, simply because of who God is. And and so I think the obedience is very apparent when I read about some of the prophets. Jeremiah. I mean, you go through the list. Like, there were just a lot of people that just didn't. They would have rather have done something else, been somewhere else, dealt with different people, whatever. But it was just obedience to a call, and they placed that call, and who that call was from, above any of their personal desires.
Case in point is your boy Jonah, right? He didn't have any passion for the Ninevites. so,
He he
so
he
having
he
them
was
be
actually
saved.
salty.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hear the intent there, and I I think there is some element of where your heart is drawn, but I don't know that that helps to necessarily identify work when it comes from God. I I can't really think of anyone who God called for whom that was true. That they
To
already that
that
God
they
called to a work for whom they already had a passion for what God was asking. I'm hard pressed to think of someone. I know Noah didn't. Maybe
I
Samson.
would I would say I would so people, I guess, the one person, and I don't know if I would call it a passion, but there wasn't. I mean, when you look at Saul, I mean, you go through the list, like, no, none of them really wanted to do it. I think it maybe the way it's written, but David seemed to be more of a person that
Okay.
was that fit more with who he was and right and who he has shown himself to be over time. Um, but you're right. I mean, Moses saw. I mean, you go through the whole, you know, the gamut. Is there's not. I can't think of anybody except David. I mean, even Gideon. I mean, nobody was like.
I,
Um,
I will agree but disagree a bit
All
in
right.
that I think,
So
gonna volley it back.
well, no, I mean, like looking at Gideon or even Moses, they knew they were called to something greater. They knew they were called to leadership. They were passionate about that. What they weren't necessarily passionate about is how God, how do I put it, what their expectation was. So it's like God is calling them, they acknowledge God is calling them, but they expect that to look a particular way. They
Sure.
expect
Moses,
to
really?
nation using a particular
From
vehicle.
Moses, from Moses, I
Moses,
get it. I don't
really?
know
You
about
see that in
Gideon, but
Moses'
yeah,
Hold
definitely
story?
on, hold on,
Moses.
hold on. So, because it's like, okay, I can't do this. I don't know if I'm up for this, whatnot. And then God says, no, go start doing these miracles, whatnot, whatnot. Fine. He gets into it. I don't, when I look at this story of Moses and Israel, it doesn't seem to me like he thought it would pan out the way that it did. Even if you look at Joseph, Joseph had some ideas that, God has something greater for me and all of that. I'm pretty sure he wasn't thinking, how things went down with Potiphar's wife or being sold into slavery or any of those things. So it's like God is calling you to something. You're acknowledging that He is. You want to serve Him. You want to do this thing, this great thing that He has in store for you. But it doesn't quite look the way you think it will. Or like I said, the vehicle that gets you to the destination isn't what you think it will be. And that's why I think you see sometimes you see the struggle or you see the dichotomy where it's like, well, it's I mean, you saw that with Jesus, right? Who was more passionate about his mission than Jesus, but then even in the garden, he's like, bruh, is it possible that this could pass? Because this I know what I signed up for, but this really isn't looking like what I thought or how I thought it would look. And I think that's something that even plagues us, right? God could tell you, you know, he could come physically and say to you, Jared, I need you to do this. And you start it off and whatnot, and then when it starts to look not the way you envisioned, I think that's where the challenge comes.
Well, I I don't see that in Moses.
Okay.
Moses was minding his business in the desert. He'd been doing it for 40 years.
Mhm.
I think he had settled into the life when he was called. I don't like that feels it feels like yoga pants to me. Just stretch
Yoga
that
pants.
there. But I'm not opposed to considering it.
And all those people were coaxed. When I mean coaxed to it. I mean I'm using it reverently, like
Yeah.
not hoodwinked or anything like that. But I'm just saying like they were coaxed. Like Moses, like there was a burning bush. There was there were all these different things that happened right
Mhm.
with Gideon. Gideon, you know, the angel came to him, and then he was like, then he had to go through his whole test and all that kind of stuff. As opposed to David, David goes to the battle to get his brothers. He sees it and was like, "Yo, this can't happen. And if nobody else is going to do it, I'll do it." Like it was like a different. It was different. I don't, So he was more, I thought a fit, and he never shied away from that moving
Mhm.
forward.
So,
Whereas, go ahead.
so could it be like I think Jerome said it, but like the whole unsettling, like it just doesn't sit well. Like there's certain situations that just doesn't sit well with you. So like Moses watching the abuse and the things of the Israelites, like that didn't sit well with him, which is why he was moved to action to protect.
To kill the dude.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's true.
his running and fleeing into the desert was probably running away from what he knew. He knew, but he didn't want to deal with it. You know what I'm saying? Like he knew his life was in danger, obviously, for killing a guard. But I think also was a running away from what he was observing and feeling. And obviously, I'm adding to the text because they're not
Well, no, I mean, I
clear.
think it makes sense. Just like the
But
passion to save his people.
right. right. Like, I don't like this. This is not a good thing to happen. Okay. And instinctively, he did something because of that unsettling that was already in him brewing underneath. I think for some of us, I won't say all, for some of us, there are certain things that really truly does not sit well with us. And therefore we may not move on it and be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna solve all the problems in the world or whatever. But I think God put certain things in each individual that is an answer to a problem in the earth. That's just my quarter.
I received that. So I'm thinking, we reflected in processing what Jerry said. We reflected on some characters. Do we see any trend lines or themes or things that help to answer Courtney's question in the characters that we processed or any other characters? And how, well, let's ask it this way and flip the question. How did they know what their work was?
I just looking at some of the characters, it's funny that they all seem to run initially. Not all, but most of them seem to run. Something unsettles them. They want to act, but they go in the opposite direction. And it's like, to Courtney's point, Kenrick's point, sorry, there has to be massaged and coaxed back. It's from Gideon to Jonah for sure was like, nah, I might want to do something, but what I want to see happen to these people ain't their salvation. I'm called to something, but it's not their salvation, right? And God has to, like, and you saw that with some of the disciples where over time it's like God just had to. So maybe the very fact that they were running from it kind of gives you an indication of, something is gnawing at them, and they're like, nah, this can't be, not me. Pick somebody else. I'm not that dude.
Not willing to sacrifice what's necessary to do it because it's like, oh, this gonna be work. Nah, I'm not.
And, then that's where Jared, the other point comes in, where you see the humility and the surrender, where they decide, look, even if what was it Jesus told Saul, who became Paul? It's hard for you to kick against pricks, right? It's like you're fighting it, but there comes a point when you just decide, look, all right.
I think there is, so, not to sound too religious or whatever, but I think I firmly believe there is a call. Like I firmly believe that that God, like, there is a definitive message to you or to me or to a person about what God wants you to do. But to Jerry's point, I think, or someone's point on here, it may not look like we thought, what the call, how we envision the call to be, like, Kendrick, I want you to do this. And it was like, yo, absolutely, I'll do this. And then you realize, like, that's not the picture I had. Right. But I do believe that there is a call. And I do believe that God, when asked, and then over time, reveals where he wants you to be or what he intends for you to be or to do or what your work is. It just may not look like you think it's going to look. So that's one of the things I see in the Bible and the theme, and then also in my life. There is a definitive. I think I understand my purpose. It's what my is the way I view my purpose, the same way God intended for me to view or to me act in my purpose.
Yeah.
If I could throw a little bit of a spanner there as well, I think sometimes it's almost like God treats you like a tax or an auditor, right? It's like, I'm only going to give you as much information as you need right now. Because if I give you more, you might go
never gonna.
sideways, or you might lose hope, or any number of things, right? And it's
Yeah.
like just enough. So you're convinced, okay, it's going this way, and then he gives you a little more, and you start to, because he knows if he gives you any more, yeah,
Yeah, I believe that because that's kind of what you see with Abraham, right? Abraham was literally said, "Go move over there. When you reach over there, I'll tell you some more." You know,
yep.
I need to get it started. And I think as I look through all the stories, particularly for the people who didn't like what they were given to do, like I really don't see Hosea Noah really having any kind of passion for building a boat to save his family. Like the way the story is told, Noah was tapped and say, "Yo, I need something from you." It's almost like there's a request that comes, and when you think through the stories, if you try to see any commonality in all the stories, there's a request that comes from God, who's to somebody who either chooses to submit to the request or object to the request. And you can even think about Pharaoh in the same regard, right? He chose not.
Correct.
He chose
Yep.
not to submit to the request, but you see that in some cases God comes a little bit more forcefully than others, you know, and other times he's not as forceful, but he always comes and makes this clear request, or or as in the case of like Joseph, maybe it's not a clear request, but he tells you, hey, this was about to happen. This was about to happen.
With Joseph,
Yeah, because that's what he did in the dream, right? He didn't tell him what this. He didn't come and say, "I need this from you." He kind of said, "I'm gonna use you like this."
correct. But even with Joseph, I mean, hindsight's 2020 when you kind of put the whole story together. But he was told what he was going to do. He was called from early when he was getting the initial dreams with his father,
Yes,
right? And
Yeah, but
so
I don't
all
think he
of
thought the
that,
journey would look like that, right?
but he
of
correct.
course,
He didn't know the
yes,
journey. He didn't know how he was going to get there. And
but it wasn't like an
based upon
act,
what
right?
happened, no one knew. Like
Yeah,
But it
it was
wasn't
more of
like
an
an act.
instruction.
It was more like a command more than it was an ask, right? Like, oh, hey, this is yours. This is your bag. Carry it. It
correct.
was that, right?
Jared, you know how appearance sometimes would give you the hand on the shoulder and be like, this is what's going to happen.
Correct.
It's almost like your opinion doesn't really count on this one. This is, yeah.
Come, here's what I need from you. Okay. So, Courtney, I don't know if you could try voicing your own. If not, I will read it. Your thought there, because it looks like your screen is back in time, like the quality. Yeah, you sound like you're on time there.
All right. Back in September, we spoke about self-will, and which was stubborn or willful adherence to one's own desires or ideas in spite of the wishes or orders of others. So, with everything that we're talking about, I'm wondering, is there a measure of humility one has to have, like, in order to get to this clarifying, what you're working?
So, I'm not sure, Courtney, and maybe Kenrick and Jerry will push back on this, but I am not sure there's a whole lot of figuring out of the what based on the stories that we are processing. It seems that the work is assigned. It's almost like an assignment that is given. The what is given, and it's given clearly. You don't have to say, "Oh, here there's a wall full of assignments here. Which one of these is mine?" The way that God has prepared us to work based on the stories that we have. and of course I'm saying this, saying that God is not limited to any box, and just because He did it all this way don't mean that there's not other ways that He works. But there's a consistency in the pattern anyway. Let's put it that way. There's a consistency in the pattern where He appears to hand out assignments and makes those assignments abundantly clear.
At some point.
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes he even
So I would
uses.
say He makes the what abundantly clear. The how is not always clear.
Yeah, gotcha.
So going back to Joseph and the dreams, it was, I don't know if the what was clear. Something happened, right?
But the dream was two forms of the same dream.
Correct.
And he may not have understood the what, but the what was clear. You're going to be in charge, and everybody else is going to bow down to you, including your parents. Well, at least your parents, your family, right?
Correct. But that doesn't. That's what I'm saying. That what still wasn't clear because it's only giving respect to the family, and from him, like, would he be the leader of his family? When the dream wasn't necessarily saying that. The dream was saying, now that we saw the whole thing play out, yes, this will happen and they will bow down to you, but you are going to be leader of this, not just them. So even the what still takes time to play out. But I do agree with you. The what is typically the first thing. The how is what you don't know, and the how is how you respond, right?
So could it be
Or
that
whether you're going to
to
respond.
him? Could it be just plain devil's the adversarial role here? Could it be that the what was simply I need you in a leadership role, and I communicated that clearly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah,
And I
that
think
was
sometimes
it.
he would even use the initial response of running to help clarify the what and the how. Because it's not like it's a surprise to him that they're like, nah, I'll just be across on the other side of the Jordan or whatever it is, right? And he'll use that choice too. Because he knew Moses would, and he let him go try to lead sheep for 40 years in the wilderness. Because
But
guess what? You have to go lead some more sheep.
it's like Abraham, right? Abraham's gonna be the father of many nations. Yeah, most of them joints were Israel, but one of them wasn't. Like it's like it's
Yeah.
we see how the what plays out.
Yeah.
Like he did. He breed Hagar, he breed Keturah, and he was the father of many
It's
nations.
like
Nations.
many
Yes, sir.
nations.
Yes.
God didn't tell us say how he was going to do it, but just that he was going to do it.
But I
But
do
it,
agree that the how is where we.
So is it, Courtney, that we trying to determine what our how is or what our what's are? Because if what we're saying is God clearly communicates the what and brings the ask specific to the individual, is it that we are now trying to figure? Is it what that we are actually trying to figure out is what our work is or how to do our work? And I feel like that's the place where there's a figuring out that
mm,
happens,
And
and
that's the
that's
humility. And
where
that's where
we.
humility comes in.
I would say humility comes in from accepting it in the first place,
Well,
because
the
yeah,
what
but
well
also from the how, because if the how doesn't look like what you interpreted, so like look at John the Baptist. Was it a leadership role? Sure. The how, running around like a madman, eating locusts, let alone how the how ended. I mean, that
well that
also
wasn't
takes.
that wasn't on
Yeah.
God. That was him just not. But no, but it's right because the how also included him understanding that he was this and he served this role for this particular time, and then once his time was up, and not death, but like he must increase and I must like it was he realized that he now had to take a step back. I think humility plays a big part in the execution of the how, to Jerry's point because you have to accept it, and you have to. The whole point is the how is all about His will.
Mm.
And so the what, if the what's clear, the how is still needs to be accomplished the way He wants the how accomplished, and He's only going to get the how done the way He wants it done. And
But there's a
so
figuring out process that happens in there. That part is not always given, and it's not always given clearly.
facts, yes.
I think too, like the humility comes in also when if he gives you something to do, he also gives you the tools, right?
Yes.
And then you can get if you forget where the tools are coming from, you'll think you're the one doing it. Yes,
Absolutely.
the goal is to yes, it's what he wants you to do, but now you've taken it on to be like I'm
Like,
the
I'm the
one.
tool.
I'm look at all that I have done. Look at what I've accomplished. Look at the lives that are being changed. Like I did that. And it's
Yeah.
like no.
Yeah.
You were a tool just like the tools he gave you to do the thing that he needed to do.
Do we sometimes confuse our hows with our whats? Do our hows become our what?
Yep.
Do our hows become our whats?
Write that down for
Not should it be, but does that happen? Do we make our hows our whats?
I
Do we
think we
blend it?
do, for sure. You see that with the disciples where, they have a what, but they're in a corner fighting about who's the greatest and who's the son of thunder and who's going to have what role, because they still haven't appreciated what he means by when his kingdom comes. It's like, oh, he's going to set up a new government. I'll get to be, Minister of Homeland Affairs with the Minister of National Security. It's like, dude, no.
Mm.
I think that's how we get tripped up a lot. We trip ourselves up, or even the enemy, we allow him to trip us up because we get so focused on the vehicle, like I said, and not on the how and not the what.
Mm. For example, um, Acts 1:8 suggests that Jesus called his disciples and us by extension to be witnesses of what, right? Preaching, sermonizing is a how.
Mm-hmm.
mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Bible study is also a how to be a witness.
Mm-hmm.
Have we made, in more organized settings, witnessing to be preaching and Bible study,
Yes.
and so confused our how with our what, and our how now becomes our what. What we are
Yeah,
here to do is to
definitely.
preach and give Bible studies, as opposed to what we are here to do is to bear witness. And we could do it by preaching, we could do it by Bible study, we could do it by lifestyle, we could do it by a combination of all three, we could do it by something else altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that might also be part of where our, what the question, the root of the question that Courtney's coming from is, how do I figure out what my how is? Because there's so many options, right? How do I know which way he really wants me to do this? And does he even care which way that I do it?
Yes.
Tell me more.
Well, I I think he cares. Um, Not that one is better or worse than another. I think he cares because he took the time to create us individually, and
Hmm.
we have our own particular talents. He's given us our own sphere of influences. He's taken the time to place us in particular situations. And because he's been so thoughtful, and you see that throughout, right? There's a common theme of, we talk about of obedience and 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 understanding that God is sovereign in in the posture and all that. So there's a common theme of all that. But you look at all those individuals, and they all did things differently, right? They all came from different backgrounds. They all were called to talk to and address different people. Even when you look at the disciples, like Paul Paul, Peter, like all they were all accomplishing the same thing, but they were just told to go to different places because of affiliations, because of what culture and customs would like all of those things. And so I think that, even with us, I think there are people that Jared, you look at this, and I've looked at Jared for a while now. I don't even know how many years now. It's 10, 12, 30, whatever. But
Right.
there's a gift that Jared has that through relationships and all that kind of stuff that he's been able to achieve an objective that God has called that all of us were not going to be able to do. Right. But I guarantee you, if Jared didn't do it, somebody else would have come in and done it because God still needed to accomplish it. It just may not have been with us. And he knew the sphere of influence that Jared had with this group, and Jerry has with his, and Lorraine has with hers, and there are conversations that I can have that you can't have, and people that I can reach that you can, and you can reach that I can. I mean, there are all these different things. So I think I think he does care about the how, and who does the how, because I think it's specific to us.
Which would make sense why he would call Jonah and not Jeremiah, right? Not that they were in the same time frame, but he called Jonah because there's something about Jonah that makes Jonah useful for this task.
Correct.
Right. In the what of calling Nineveh to repentance. I plan to do that by using you, my house, for you to go and talk to them.
But where you said how we can replace the what with the how, like put it in its place. I think too
How and the
another
what into the what, yeah. Mhm.
yeah. I think the danger is when, which we are, a lot of people are how focused, and so when we highlight certain hows, right, and not highlight others, those who are doing the ones that are not highlighted feel like they're not witnessing
Mm.
because or it's not, and therefore they strive to do the hows that are recognized when they're like, no, that's not what you were supposed, like you didn't know what you were doing, but you were doing exactly what I needed you to do. And you may not see the impact now, but you are making major changes in lives that you have no clue because you're focused on. But this how is the one everybody talks about. This how is the one that gets accolades and recognition and whatever. Like I could see the effect of this how. But this one over here that I'm naturally gifted for and naturally lean to, like, this is nothing. And then so you strive for less what you're supposed to be doing to go be the arm and the leg over here when you're supposed to be the head. Now we walking around headless and going into chaos.
I like that you say that, Lorraine. It makes me think about what Jerry said first to begin. And it
Mm-hmm.
makes me find a marriage point there. Our our passions and our giftings, and maybe those things that stir us, may help to inform the hows, but don't define the what.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Hmm. Yep.
mm.
Gives you a what, and then you can leverage those passions and areas to help
Yeah.
you
We
figure
can't.
out.
We can't provide the what.
Ooh, that is, yep. You, Lauren, our boy Darius Daniel, Dr. Darius Daniel, remember he was saying
Mm-hmm.
he was always passionate to share knowledge with people, and he thought because of how much he liked law would be the what, right?
Mm-hmm.
To your point, Jared. And then he realizes, oh no, the what is you about to become a minister? And we what? Be a theologian and be broke and be, yeah. I see your
Yeah.
point. To quote you, I received that. I received that.
Courtney, how you feeling? You get an answer to your question there? Are you able to identify your what? Or do you recall when you were given your what?
Yeah. What is your what, dog?
He's delayed again.
He might be thinking. I don't think I know my what. So while he's thinking, I don't think I know my what. I know
We talking to
my
you, Courtney?
house. I know my natural. Um, I know some, not all. I know some of my natural gifts. Based on, because sometimes you can't see it, but other people can see it, or they're impacted by it, and you have zero clue as to what's going on, but they're impacted and they're being changed. But the what, I don't think I've gotten like a Lorraine this is the thing. Like for me, internally, I've always wanted to help people. Like that's my always have been like that. I don't like seeing people struggling. I don't like seeing people hurting. I don't like seeing I just don't like seeing people go through life. There's so many things, but just go through life alone, not having the help they need. You know, because we're getting to be like a very selfish, more selfish society where numero uno is priority and everybody else can just.
But your how could be whether you're a nurse, like you could be, or you could like an assisted suicide. I mean, I don't know. Like your hows are big, or like
Yes, that's suicide.
Yeah, we just
You just kind of slipped it in
self
there.
deletion, assisting people
I
with self
mean,
deletion. Right?
Angel of mercy, right?
I'll put
Angel
myself
of
in
mercy.
line, you know.
You know what's interesting about that, Kenrick, to be fair to what you're saying, not so much the angel of mercy part, but so fast. We kind of pigeonhole service to God to take place in a certain realm or sphere of activities. And then confuse a whole lot of people or move them away from what that God might be calling them to legitimately, right? But you're like, well, there's no way God could be calling me to play basketball professionally as my what to serve Him. There's no way because there's no witnessing in that, right? Not unless I decide I'm not going to play on a certain day because I want to make a statement, right? Like,
and then
there's
tell everybody about it.
right. Like unless I'm doing that, then there's no way God is using me in that regard. Or there's no way He could be calling me to use my gift and become an R&B singer, right? There's no way, because if I'm not singing about Jesus overtly and it's in this sphere of music, there's no way. And
Whenever I hear stuff like that, I automatically think of Jephthah. Like it like he was already told he was not this and was not that, and when he was told, we talked about it, so many times. But that kind of brings me back to like God will use anyone and everyone to accomplish whatever He wants to accomplish or needs to accomplish, and and doesn't really care about what other people think or say because it's what He needs to accomplish at that particular time. And so if if it is the baby, then I'm just no, I don't, you don't know. Like I won't,
True.
Are we saying use you for a point or a moment, or are you saying consistently?
so
that's actually a really good question.
Let's do this to ask that question, because I had something on cue, and it's one of those things I'm like,
Okay.
I will use it if we need to, right? But somehow this conversation has dovetailed right into that. Let's go to Ezra 1. Ezra 1 to 4. What up, Courtney? Mic check.
All right, I'm here.
1 2 1 2.
All right, sounds better.
All right, now that you're here, go ahead, Ezra 1 to 4. That's you.
Oh, of course he come back to read.
Right on time.
Right.
Walk right into your role. Into your what?
This is
Oh,
All right, so you said Ezra chapter 1, verse
Mhm.
1 to 4. Mm-hmm. Yes. No.
yeah. If your joint goes on delay after you read, then this is
That's a sign.
this.
It's a sign.
Hey, man.
I will never read on this thing again.
All right. In the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, the Lord fulfilled the prophecy he had given through Jeremiah. He stirred the heart of Cyrus to put this proclamation in writing and to send it throughout his kingdom. This is what the king of Cyrus of Persia says: The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. He has appointed me to build him a temple at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Any of you who are his people may go to Jerusalem and Judah to rebuild this temple of the Lord, the God of Israel, who lives in Jerusalem, and may your God be with you. Wherever this Jewish remnant is found, let their neighbors contribute toward their expenses by giving them silver and gold, supplies for their journey, and livestock, as well as voluntary offering for the temple of God in Jerusalem.
So yeah, Cliff, what was your question again?
No, I said, are we saying that God will use you in any capacity for a moment or consistently? Because we're saying that, it could be the baby. Is it for that moment or consistently using him in that capacity?
Let's use Cyrus as a case study to help answer that question, or a starting point, because that's what we've done so far. Is God using Cyrus in this moment, or is he consistently using him?
You asking me or you just asking
That's the
everybody?
group. I
No,
mean,
you
can,
asked the question, dog.
I say, well, I can't clearly answer that. The only reason I'm saying that because I'm not fully familiar with Cyrus's whole history.
Mhm.
So Cyrus. Well, it's funny. You look at Cyrus and you look at Artaxerxes when it comes to Nehemiah, right? Like they all, when they were all,
They fulfilled the purpose, right?
they weren't Levites and they weren't they weren't the
Right.
children of Israel, right? And
Okay.
they didn't believe, in the Ten Commandments and the ceremony. Like none of those things were part of their thing. However, there was something here in this particular moment where Cyrus, and I guess overall he acknowledged who God was. I mean, it says it in there,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know.
Like
I can't remember if
Nebuchadnezzar.
Artaxerxes did in Nehemiah, or if it was more just an affinity for Nehemiah. But there was something there that we were used in that particular moment in time to achieve whatever it is that God was looking to achieve.
So what do you
And
do
so
with Cyrus?
I would say it's temporary. We don't know the whole story of Jonah, but that joint was short, and that's all we know. That it might have just been him for that period of time, and his Bama went off to, do whatever he was doing and never to prophesy again.
So let me
Is that a God thing or is that an us thing though? Is it that if we, to Courtney's point, if we remain humble and allow God to use us, He will use. The reason I'm asking that is because I look at like Peter and Judas. They both denied Jesus. One of them decided to not let that be the end of his story, and the other one did. So it's not a God thing. It's like I'll use you both to fulfill prophecy, to be a light to the world, to any number of things. But how much I use you, how far I use you, how long I get to use you is up to you.
Let's ask this question to maybe unpack Cliff's question a little bit. How many of the Bible characters were momentary uses of gods, and how many of them were lifetime? And is God about a lifetime usage, or is he about achieving purposes and doesn't matter. I guess that's what I'm throwing out there for us to consider.
For your lifetime usage, wouldn't that be only if you allow that to happen? So, like, God could use anybody, anybody. So, in any situation, um, momentarily or even for a prolonged period of time. Um, but a lifetime usage requires submission, does it not?
I think temporary does too. I mean, so that I think it's purposes because he even said, you know, if I need the rocks to cry out, I mean, that
Right,
was
exactly.
it just serves the purpose
Mm-hmm.
of praise. I mean, I think he's very much into purposes, and you know, your purpose may be for a lifetime.
Or maybe for a season, right? It might be for a
Yeah.
task.
Yeah.
I would have to say that God is in the saving business. He wants to save everybody. But if your intentions are to have your heart hardened and bent on hellfire, then he will use that for the purpose of saving others as well. It's kind of like I don't know, like keto. If you practice keto is not necessarily about attacking your going on the offense, but it's more of a defense. It's more of a using your strengths against you.
I thought you were talking about
I
the
thought keto was a diet. What's keto?
I'm about to ask the same question. I'm like, now you need to unpack what that is because
Keto's not a diet?
Keep going, man. Keep
I
going, man.
thought he was talking about KETO. I was like, really? You could use
Hold
it
on, time out. No, seriously. Isn't keto a diet?
Keto for a keto, right? The martial art. Right.
I think I caught that at the end.
oh, okay.
I
All right.
that day.
I was with Kendrick. I was a KETO, the diet. And I was like, what? It's defensive. It's about building your immune system. It's not about.
I was like,
It's like, what?
I don't even know what this what is.
It's a keto. It's a martial art technique like jujitsu and okay.
So let me ask this question.
I was like, Nikita's a dog. Like, I mean, it's like, I don't
Thank
know.
you, Ross.
It's like, I was like, I'm confused.
Let me ask this question to kind of maybe bridge a gap and move us a little bit forward. What is a servant?
Somebody that serves.
Someone who has no rights.
Yeah, well,
Who has given up their rights.
servant is everybody except Kanye. Sorry. Yay. My bad. I'll be quiet. Never mind.
I'm not necessarily asking about biblical servant. I'm just asking the concept of servant. You know, because the biblical servant is actually a word that's a slave, and I'd probably ask that instead. But I'm just asking, you know,
somebody who's in servitude to you for a period of time. It doesn't have to be a lifetime.
Very true.
There's some period of time. But I think to Lorraine's point, if we have to continue to be a servant, it's a choice that you have to make to let go. Because Courtney's point as well about putting that stubborn will aside. You basically have to wake up every day and decide, today I will continue to be a servant of God as opposed to self.
And a servant put others before themselves.
The dictionary says a person employed to work for another, especially one performing household duties.
and I asked that question because of Courtney's question was about how do I identify my work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Servant is someone who works for someone. So who works for someone else, who's employed to do a task for somebody else. Someone is giving them instruction, someone is giving them direction, and they're responsible to do what is being asked of them from whoever is they're employed for. And it doesn't necessarily mean employed that you get a salary like how we do employment, but someone to whom you have some kind of obligation.
Who has authority and you have obligation to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's a bad servant still a servant.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Is a bad servant still a servant?
Yes.
Well, once he's employed, even if he's not doing what he's being employed to do, if he's employed, he's still a servant
A
until
bad
he's
servant,
fired.
a bad servant and a good servant are both servants. So a servant is really just someone who's in the employ of someone else.
hmm
Or
So,
under someone's authority.
right.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you're doing what they say.
Yep.
And we can contract people to be in our service, until they retire. We can attract permanent employees, but we could also hire contract employees and vendors and all those kinds of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those would still be servants as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So to be a servant, I don't necessarily have to have I don't necessarily have to be salaried or be working towards a pension with my employer. I could come in and do a job and still be a servant.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. There was a parable about that.
So does that help to answer Cliff's question?
Yes. For me.
Tell me more.
What's that?
Tell me more
About my
about how it answers the question for you.
because as you were saying that when I said there's a parable about, I thought about the parable of the workers, that started at some started at 8, some started at 12, some started at 5, and they were all rewarded the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
The time served wasn't the determining factor as to what the reward was going to be, or whether or not they were even considered to be a servant or a worker or whatnot. No matter what it was, you were a worker, and ultimately it was, and I guess the purpose of it was like God was the master, the employer was the person that was determining whether or not they were or not,
And what the work was.
and what the work was,
Right.
and the time associated for that work.
So to get work, you actually have to be a servant.
You had to be employed. Yes.
Yes, you'd have to be employed as a servant. Yes, you'd have to be.
Yes.
So if you want to figure out what your work is, you have to figure out whether you're employed or not.
Yep.
Because if you're employed, then you'll get work.
Correct. You can't get your assignment if you're not employed.
You cannot get your assi-
Oh, hold
I
on.
would say-
Let me finish. Because again, employment doesn't have to be a full-time thing. We all have daily paid laborers. We have people who are fortnightly, people who are monthly, people who are executive directors and just get a stipend. There are all sorts of different types of servants. So I see a scenario where you have people who, God will use full-time, and you have somebody who they're employed. They may not fully understand the terms and conditions of their employment, and they get a task to do, like, who was it? With Babylon.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Yes.
So, but he had a task, he had a mission, he was given an assignment, and he did it.
So I guess the only reason I push back is that there are some people who receive their task when they're not employed, and they choose whether or not they're going to be employed. So the people, so going back to the parable, there were people that were not employed. They were told the task, and they had the choice of whether or not they were going to complete the task.
Yeah, they were recruited into employment.
They were recruited into to the what, and then they had to determine whether or not they're willing. And we talked about it with Abraham, whether or not you're going to accept the what. They weren't employed at the
what
time.
would make you a servant? The task.
If you
Taking on the task.
did, yes. if you did the what, that would then make you the servant.
Yes. Either way, to do the work, you have to be a servant, not necessary to receive the work.
Correct.
Okay. I
You wouldn't have you wouldn't have altar call if everybody.
just hear me
The
out.
altar call
I
is
hear
for
what you're
people that ain't
saying, but I
employed.
mean, I hear what you're saying, but we see where, I mean, even in our current construct, you can have somebody who's employed and they can just decide certain tasks they're not going to do, but they're employed.
Facts.
Right. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
That's bad servant, good servant. Absolutely. Still
Correct.
servant. They still were employed.
But we're
They
saying
still,
that you can't become a servant until you accept some
No, I'm
tasks.
not saying. I'm saying there are times when you don't have to be a servant
to be offered a
to
job.
be offered to be told the what.
Right.
The what doesn't make you the servant. The
Okay.
acting on the what makes you the
Makes you a
servant.
servant.
Somebody can come up here and say, "I want you to do this." I'm not their servant
Or not
unless
your servant, yes.
not their servant yet
Well,
until I accept and say, "Okay, yes, I will do this."
I just remembered that passage of scripture. So yes, where it says, "To whomever you yield yourself, your your members to obey his servants or slaves you are," right? So it becoming a servant
Correct.
comes with obedience. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. So what about in Matthew in chapter 6 and 24 when it says no man can serve two masters? Aren't we then?
Well, that's been a bad servant now because you're trying to serve. It's like I always remember this silly story where this guy, I think he was the manager at a Honda assembly plant, and one day, well, his car was down. He had a Honda, of course, but one day he drove his wife's Camry to work, and they wanted to fire him, right? Because it's like, you, dude, supervisor at the Honda plant, and but that's effectively what we do sometimes, right?
But I would take it a little bit further. Yes, I would agree with that. I would go a step further and say it's more a case of when the two are in conflict,
Mm.
you can
Yeah.
only serve one.
Yep.
Yes,
One
So,
has to lose. One has to
so
lose.
if you have
you can't
to,
work.
if you're working two jobs and they never, and you can work here one day and then work there the next day, or leave one and go to the other, yeah, you're serving two masters. But when both jobs actually to come in at 6 o'clock on Sunday,
You're screwed.
which one do
You
you
got to
go?
choose. You got to pick one.
You can't serve two masters. You
Yep.
can't go to both jobs because one is in Gaithersburg and the other one is in DC. You literally can't be at both jobs and faithfully execute to both jobs. So you have to
Yep.
choose one. So that's kind of where that you can't serve two masters is. Ultimately, one is your master, the one and only one, and that's the one to whom you yield yourself.
Wives, all that.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah, you have the queen mother, and then you have all the others.
Oh, they know their days, right?
I thought
And
my
it's-
internet connection had gone bad. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that.
Dang.
So, to my question, how do you identify, or can you readily identify a servant of God?
You
Can
should.
you readily identify?
Readily, no.
Let me go back a step. What does it mean to be a servant of God?
taking up those assignments, right? Acting on those assignments, whatever they are.
Mm-hmm.
He submitted and partnered in the mission that he's trying to go after.
Right. Can you readily identify a servant of God?
Not always.
No.
Why not?
Because
No.
you may look at some of the missions that God or assignments God gives people, and not even it may not even make sense to you.
The
Well-
problem I have is The problem I have is readily.
Yeah, readily. Yeah.
Yes, it may not just be like instantaneous. You might have to. Yeah.
By their fruit.
Fruit you'll know them. That's what I thought about.
Well,
Yeah,
eventually,
but it takes a
you
while
know.
to grow, right?
Eventually.
All right. Well, let me ask it this way: Are there common characteristics, identifying characteristics of a servant of God?
Are there what characteristics?
common
There should be,
common to
yes.
all,
Yes.
or identifying these characteristics typically identify servants of God. Is there like a, you know a servant of God because they always like a UPS worker because they always in brown and in brown and they have the UPS patch so that he's a UPS worker. Can you do servants of God have some kind of, I wouldn't want to say uniform, but identifying characteristics?
Like just by looking at them?
Like fruits
Huh?
of the spirit.
Just by looking at them?
Long
No,
dresses.
not. It doesn't have to be
You must.
visible. It has to be
But I
whatever.
mean,
Whatever.
like, you're talking about like in a moment, see a person, but like they're serving a God?
No, not in a moment. It doesn't. So I'm asking, do servants of God have identifying characteristics? Can a servant of God be identified? And what are the things that would identify a servant of God?
I don't.
I'm going with the fruits of the
Going
spirit.
along
So let me
with
start
what
with can it be done before we go into what they are.
I want to say yes.
It could be done. I think it also can be wrong.
Tell me more.
I think once again it goes back to readily, right? And I think the readily is the problem because I think over time you might be able to, because I think in moments I think we've played victim to this. In moments we identify people as this and this and this, and over time you realize, oh, maybe they're not. Now we're all sinners, and I get it, right? So I think that's why I'm saying, I don't know if it's readily. You could be wrong, right?
How
So,
about? Go ahead. Go ahead.
so you can recognize over time a servant of God. But you have to use God's standards to recognize that person.
Beautiful. So we go in there. What's the standard for God's servants? But before you answer that question, let's go back a step and go, what about the people who are day workers or single contract vendors? All right, what about those people?
Right.
Right? If you're gonna judge us over time, and I was only a servant when I did this job, right? Was I a servant or not? If you judge me over time, then will you get?
Well, I can make that judgment.
Answer about whether I was a
No.
servant here?
I had that. I was thinking about it. Like, what about like Balaam? Like, didn't he? I was like,
So
there was a moment.
For me, the easy answer is that's the Holy Spirit. I can't, and I won't. Like I'm not. That's not. I don't think that's my role. I don't think that's my responsibility. I think because going back, you're looking at it. There's a lot of people that you can look at on the surface at what they do or what not, and what they don't do or whatever, and you can say that is this or not this and whatnot based upon whatever, right? And I just won't. I mean, I think God is bigger. I think God is bigger than that. To where there's some things that that are outside of my purview, and that will not look like what I think it will look like.
So what if you're the Jewish people are now saying that
I'm not having this conversation online.
That Maitreya has come.
You will not take my job. You will not. Nope.
No, I'm just.
There goes your Bitcoin.
No, this is public. This is public knowledge, man. I am not saying anything that is.
The comments are not.
I'm not saying anything that is offensive. I am saying that some of them are saying that Maitreya has come, and they're identifying this particular person as possibly the Messiah. What if your children bought into that? You're telling me that it's not your job to discern whether or not this person.
So I.
Yeah, I'm just throwing something out.
I don't want to comment.
I'm listening to Kanye because I believe he is a servant of God. How do you know? like God is using Kanye to stir up some mess. Like I'm not
That's
saying
what he
he is,
said.
but I'm saying if your child comes and says that, do you now have a responsibility to try and make that evaluation in
Okay.
that instance?
I like that. I like that one a little better. Or
I
is it
got
that
you,
it's a
Chris.
little
I
safer?
got
Is
you.
that what y'all saying?
Yeah, that was.
Dave Chappelle gave us some advice. Let's take it. With
That he did.
yeah, Kenner.
Oh, no, I'm not. I have nothing. I'm.
Oh, no,
Y'all want to follow
I was,
Kanye?
and the
Kids
question
come say
was
they want
sitting
to
at your
follow
feet
Kanye.
because it was a response. Because it was a response to something you said. I mean, what? Yeah, you said it was not. It's not my responsibility, and I kind of agree with you. But Cliff is making a good point. Are there some instances where we need to make that assessment?
Correct. And so I don't believe in always and nevers, right? I think there are circumstances, and I think there are things that are clearly outlined, right? For instance, no one's gonna be, I and you're not gonna come to me and tell me raping some lady is part of, like, it's just there's certain things that are gonna fall outside of,
Okay.
right? And I think there's consistent. I think there's consistency in the Bible. However, when you're over, back to the question, are there identifying characteristics? I think there are characteristics. Whether or not those characteristics imply that someone is this, I think is where I'm just like, you know,
All right,
by
let's.
by someone doing this, because I can see someone. Um, I think there's selfless people who don't believe in God, right? And so the selfless act that I can attribute to someone who's a Christian, be like, oh my gosh, in that selfless, and he's following the steps of God or Christ. Someone else who doesn't believe in that is only doing it because they believe it's the right thing to do for whatever reason. I can attribute those characteristics to being,
Right.
or that person to being, this. And I guess that's what I'm.
So I want to just go back to go left to come right to so we tracking along the lines and show and make sure we follow how it's all interconnected, or at least we stay on track. So Courtney's original question was, how do I know what my work is? And we've kind of gone into the space of, you know what your work is because it was assigned to you in your role as a servant, whether you were contracted or were already on the register to be a servant, right? Um, what then came to me was for my question, as we look at Cyrus here in the book of Ezra, right? I did a little bit of reading on him. He was the furthest thing from Jewish, right? He was anything but Jewish, but here he is being being used as a servant of God, or functioning in the role of a servant of God, doing the work of God. And here we are looking back, you know, thousands of years later and saying, yes, he was doing the work of God, or he was in the employ of God, doing God's work in this instance, right? Maybe he was not a lifetime worker. Maybe he was not, you know,
Maybe.
maybe he wasn't. I'm not. I don't know enough about him to say yes or no, right?
Mm-hmm.
All his life. So maybe he wasn't a lifetime worker, but in this moment, he was doing the work of God and was a servant in God's employ by his own testimony here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think about, it made me think about in modern times, how is there a way to identify first, me to recognize others who might be doing the work of God, particularly since they may not look like what we think people who got God does God work would be, and then to Courtney's question, what if the work that God is asking me to do doesn't look like what people think? And what challenges are there in my work being received? I know as a servant, I just need to be faithful whether they receive it or not, right? We get that from Jeremiah and
Sure.
whatnot. It's not about whether they receive it, whether I'm going to do it, but I'm more talking about the reception. So, like, how do we, or is there any kind of way to recognize people who are authentically sent to do the work of God,
Can I
considering what we're talking about, the work
can I
of God?
ask a quick question before?
Sure.
Can I ask a quick question about that? So, can I ask you, given that we know that Cyrus
We believe.
was, huh,
We
was
believe.
doing at this point, in this particular point, he was doing the work of God. I think we've established that
We
in
believe that.
Ezra
Yeah.
1.
Yes, we believe
Just
that.
at this point, in this moment,
In this moment, yes, we believe it.
if you're looking at him, what characteristics does he have where you would identify him as doing the work of God?
If I do that, we answer the question and we go home.
Huh?
So, I would say one of the characteristics that it appears is unified, and it doesn't always look the same on everybody, but you actually see it in Jesus, particularly in the verse that Courtney started with, is the um, this I'm taking direction from this person, and this person is guiding my actions. Now, there are some people who misrepresent that clearly,
Correct.
right? But that is firstly, these people are in submission to this authority, and it, yeah. So that's one of the first things that I would say is an identifying characteristic. Is that
But
is that
because of what you said, because that's where I kind of fall off. Because at the end of the day, there are a lot of people that say they are under the direction of God, right? For this, the only reason we know is based upon how it plays out in the privilege of being able to look. Which is why I go back. The only way I can know for certain, with any certainty, that they are is because
You mentioned
it's been confirmed,
them.
right? Especially in the moment, right?
Yes, in the moment you can't really tell.
You can't really tell unless you have the Holy Spirit that's giving you guidance, because there's no way to tell with 100% certainty
In the moment, you mean?
in the moment.
There's no way to tell with 100% certainty, but as we see with the case of Jesus, who never provided 100% certainty, they are very strong indicators present in the moment that allow people to believe or reject. And there's that and you notice that God doesn't actually do the in the moment confirmation.
Correct. Agreed.
Doesn't actually do that. He actually leaves space for doubt.
Because it required faith.
Correct. But he gives strong enough evidence to people who know. So, like when John the Baptist says, "Are you the one, or should we expect another?" Jesus doesn't come back and say, "But of course, what are you asking me? What do you mean?" I mean, he doesn't say it like that. He does go back and say, "Well, remember what the sign said it was going to be? That's what's happening. So, what do you think?" It's like more like, "What do you think?" I guess where I was coming from with this was to your point, the how doesn't always look like the how and the who. The who that God chooses to use from moment to moment and what he gives them to do doesn't always fit into our limited scope and view of what a servant of God should be or look like.
Okay.
And our perception of the how it changes as we grow. So 3 years ago, you probably thought the how looked a certain way, and as you become more, as you build a relationship with God and you become more grounded in what He says, you're like, oh, I was dumb. What was that? Like that is not it over there. Like, for example, me as an example. So like, and then once again, I'm not calling people dumb because I know when I'm using this example, it's gonna sound like that. But
yes, she is, everyone. I know. I'm joking.
Super
I'm
facts.
joking. Go ahead.
Even now, so like there's the idea that certain kind of music is not godly music. You know what I'm saying? Like gospel rap is not what God wants. God wants hymns and maybe contemporary music.
Mm-hmm.
But rap is not it. Like that's
Mhm.
not God can't use that gospel rap to no. He wouldn't have used that. He would have used that, but he wouldn't have used it. And if
Mhm.
people still think that way, and I'm neither saying choose one or the other, but just that mindset that you're like, God only does things this way. If it's not in this, then it's not God. And it's like, in some cases, obviously, but it's not. I feel like we tie it to preferences or what we're used to.
Right.
Like this is normal. This is acceptable for the Christian culture. this is what we do. That right there is of the devil.
I think also what happens is we get lost in taking what God meant for a moment uh, and setting it up as a standard.
That's facts too.
Yeah, sometimes God
Well,
just uses things for a moment to make it to make the point or to drive it home, but he doesn't necessarily mean that we should use it continually.
And
I
only.
I like to think of it as, there's always a difference between his um, preferred will and his permissive will.
There you go.
So there may be something he may allow. It doesn't mean it's prescriptive. That's not
Mhm.
what he wants to.
Well, Paul said, "I must become all things to all people that I might win
But I
some."
might by all means save some.
But
Yep.
thank you. And I think, in a sense, God is not compromising Himself, but He is trying to reach out to us by any means necessary, so that He can bring us around to the truth.
That
Because my,
the
my
point you
perception
made
So
of
is there a line?
well, there is, but I think the last time we were on, Jared, you had put it together beautifully when we were referencing the first miracle that Jesus did, the wedding feast in Cana. We could dissect that and try to go all different ways with it, but the point of it, in my mind, and like I said, you brought it together nicely, was he is so focused on the relationship and bringing us over
Mhm.
that he reached out, perhaps in the most appropriate way then, to win people over. Some people could be like, well, why this, why that? Was it grape juice? Was it not grape juice? Was it? We're missing the point, right?
I don't know that it was to win anybody over in that instance, but I hear your point that
Mhm.
he used an unconventional manner. I'm not
Because he
sure.
focuses relationship.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that, Jared.
I
I think the verse called out and then pointed out specifically, and it didn't talk about any of the guests. I think it talked about the servants who helped him, and it referenced with the servants like they were. There was something that by them witnessing that, the fact that they called the servants witnessing it out. I mean, it might have been for them.
right, and
Um,
I agree they may have benefit from it, but his reluctance to even participate and the fact that he had to bring them in doesn't mean that he was seeking them out, right? Those are the
True.
people he had
Agree.
to work
Yeah, yeah,
with.
yeah, yeah. I got you. Okay,
So he
I'm with you.
wasn't necessarily trying to bring anybody in with it. However, he was intentional in trying to um, demonstrate active concern for the individuals involved. Like
I'm with
that
you.
was
Okay.
intentional there.
Yeah.
The saving part, I don't see it, and I'm open to process it, but I don't see it. I'm gonna say this just to be a little transparent. One of the challenges that I'm having personally is is God using or attempting to use me? um, and it's a question that I wrestle with internally in my own head because some of the ways I perceive him to use me, I'm not sure you know, uh, they're not conventional, and I'm not talking about necessarily the openly Jesus stuff, Bible study, and them kind of things. Like, we could bless water for the thirsty as being a Jesus thing for now, but there are some other things, and so that's kind of where it's, is he a servant of God? Am I a servant of God? Um, if it looks like this.
But
So
maybe it's tied to that same Hosea experience, right?
Hmm.
I don't think he thought, or most people around him, people who probably think, do it for real, 3 or 4, why?
But I mean,
But
like
he already knew God was using it, right? And he was being a servant, even if it didn't look.
Hmm.
so
But
I'm
he had
I'm
strong
not a
confirmation for that. I'm sorry. Go
was
Sorry?
that
ahead.
again?
I said he had strong confirmation from God for that.
He did.
I'm not a standard guy. I don't do standards. I don't believe in standards. I don't.
I didn't peg you as that type of person.
Yeah. I know it's hard to believe.
Who would have
Um,
thought? Who would have thought?
and I struggle with
clarify that
standards.
for me.
I struggle with standards. I struggle with standards when it comes to God,
Hmm.
Tell me
right?
more. Because you're the
Yes,
one who said,
yes,
if God
please.
asked me to rape a little girl, like, there's not
I
not a
never said
standard.
rape. I said kick him in the balls.
No, 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 no. Today,
Earlier,
you
Oh,
use
earlier.
that
today.
sentence.
Yeah.
Today, yeah. Not
Yeah,
the
yeah,
kicking the
yeah.
ball thing. I'm with you on
Well,
that.
I'm
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 there
just
with you
saying
there.
based upon who God is, right? But I'm
Right.
saying, but I guess my point. Yes, you would turn that against me. Yes. Um, the I was having this conversation with my mom because my my mom called me the other day. She's like, "I'm praying for you," and it wasn't like the "Hey, baby, I'm just thinking about you, praying about you." It was like it was very active
Holy,
concern,
Praying for your
and it
soul.
was
holy prostrate on the floor.
as well- yeah,
Falling
prostrate
down there.
before. I was like, I was like, are your clothes ripped and is there ash on your like? I want to know what kind of prayer this is. So I was, but I say that to say I don't believe in standards, and I don't think God. I don't believe in them simply because I think God is too big and He can do whatever He wants to do, and the things that we attribute as standards or normal don't necessarily have to fit in with what God has. And when we do that, we then limit God and put him in this box, and things have to look a certain way. And they have to look a certain way because I think it's we're comfortable with it looking that way. And if it looks any different, right, it makes us uncomfortable. And I'm just like, God, I believe God is big enough and powerful enough to deal with all that himself. And it's not up to us to figure out what those standards are or litigate what those standards are and then pronounce judgment on what those standards like give him the space and allow him and the Holy Spirit to do what they do, and we just right when it's our turn to step in, if it's our turn to say something because he's authorized us to say it, then we say it. If it's not us to say it, then we don't say it. And I think that all of that, I think, and that's why I say no stand. Like God, just let God be God and let Him be big enough to be, and then we then submit to His authority and to His will, and then allow that to be it. The
Hmm.
standard is submission
Agreed.
and
I would,
leaving.
I, I would agree with that. So I'll add that the story of Cyrus made me think about the story of the potter with Jeremiah, and it kind of adjusted my perspective on it. So, a lot of times, and I've wrestled this a couple of times with Z on the call, but I kind of wish he was on because it's like a new revelation for me, not for the conversation we had, but in light of that conversation, is a new revelation for me on what God is doing or saying with the illustration of the potter. I almost used to think that when he shapes the vessel for whatever purposes, there's a potential understanding that we don't have any control over the shape. Therefore, God is making us into who we are. So He's forcing us to be this or forcing us to be that. And what I'm getting from this story of Cyrus and the way this conversation has been shaken out is that the clay is the clay, and the consistency and makeup of the clay is the consistency and makeup of the clay. What he does is that he manipulates the clay to make the vessel to serve the purpose that he wants. And so if you say you're making a garbage can, he manipulates the clay. He doesn't change the nature of the clay.
Based on the materials he's got, he uses what he's got. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and he's like, I'm using clay. This piece of clay will make a garbage can. He didn't make it into a garbage can, but he manipulated so it can be used to put garbage.
Yeah.
So he's not changing the nature of the clay. And I think I have seen the shape or the device that is being used as what I'm being made for, as opposed to the purpose that the clay is going to serve, whatever the nature of the clay is. Because he's not adjusting that in that illustration. He's adjusting the use of the clay. And so I'm gonna use this clay to make this cup to drink inside, or to use the thing,
or to collect urine.
Or to collect urine.
It doesn't matter.
Right? And that's kind of where that servant is, because I'm using the clay for this. The clay is serving a purpose, and he's the one directing and making the purposes go as he determines. And so to say that a garbage can or a potty is not a servant of God because it doesn't have a noble purpose, kind of undermines, as Henrik suggests, the bigness of God to use whomever for whatever. And that was kind of transformative for me today for my own assessment of my usage. I could very well be a potty. And that should be all right because that's the employ, right?
No, I mean, I kind of get what you're saying, but no, not but. However, I would say, I don't sit in the seat of condemnation, but I sit in the seat of judgment all the time. So just because I may subscribe to something you may have said at one point does not mean I agree with everything that you say. So you may be used by God at that point for me, regardless of your use, if your thought of doing what you were doing was for that. God may have used you at that moment, at that time, for me, but I still have to ask him for discernment on whether or not I should continue to watch or consider you as a vessel, or what you're doing as a vessel. I think a lot of people have been used at moments that people needed to hear or see or have things touch them, but it didn't necessarily mean that they were that they're following Christ. Because I heard Kendrick when he said, the thing about standards. God is a God of standards. I think he uses things to help you to get to the point of understanding and knowing how to build a foundation to carry out those standards. But I never think that he uses it at the detriment of losing somebody else. You see what I'm saying? God is not going to.
Henrik said he doesn't.
I heard him. I'm trying to think of something. So a friend of mine told me, was telling me about Raising Canaan, and he would describe the show to me, and eventually I said, "Man, let me watch the show because it sounds like it's a great plot." So I watched the whole series of Raising Canaan, 50 Cent show.
Mm-hmm.
Loved the premise and the plot of how things kind of worked out. I thought it was fascinating how he wrote it. Couldn't really take it for my nature. So I decided not watching it anymore. Did that when it comes back on, it's not me. And the reason why I realized that is because one day I was driving down the street. This young man who was Italian cut me off. And the first thought that came in my head was, you freaking mooly.
From Raising
I
Canaan.
got that.
Once again,
I got that, but I'm saying I got that because I had been watching the show, something that I never would have thought of, period. Not that it's in my heart, not that that's my nature, but that was the thought that popped in my head. I didn't say it, but that was the thought that popped in my head. And that's when I said, not good for me. Good in the moment that I heard some things, but once I got into it, didn't produce the fruit that was of God for me. For me. All right. Not condemning the show for somebody else that might want to watch it. Just I'm not doing it. No. You got it? Did that help some?
It does.
Okay. I'll take that. But you paused.
That helps Cliff for me.
Okay.
And it reminded me of something that even I said earlier, and I'm gonna say it a different way. That not every servant is a good and faithful servant. And so the goal for me anyway should be to strive to be a good and faithful servant, and then let the chips fall where they may, and that's where the sustaining part is in the good and faithful part. Because you could be a servant who does his chore today but doesn't do it tomorrow, still servant, but not necessarily good and faithful. And I think that may be where the distinction is in that good and faithful part.
That goes to Courtney's point with Balaam.
Yeah.
But my pause, Cliff, was that yes, in that and that was kind of to my earlier point. In that moment, if you would have said, and I was in the car, right? If I'm looking at you in that moment without taking anything else that I know about you in consideration, I'd be like, yo, this racist, right? But, however, knowing who you are, I know that's not who you are to be. And so that's what I'm saying. So like in the moment, that's my overall point. Like I can't find judgment or create a narrative of who you are, right? Based upon this one thing that happened. And I cannot say these are your characteristics based upon this one thing that happened. Either way, even if you were like, praise the Lord, right? And I mean, you said it. I don't know if that's who you are. That's my whole point. Like it's gotta be, I can't take a moment in time to really determine if
that's why I said
for good or for bad, right? For good or for bad.
Good or for bad. Good or for bad. Correct. Because what you thought, if you would have said it, someone would have been like, yo, this dude.
Yeah.
But that's not who you are. And I guess that's my, or at least I know who you know you to be. And I guess that's my thing.
I appreciate that.
So
No, I think you are. I was just making a point.
So a moment in time could reveal you to be a servant, but you can't determine a good and faithful servant based on a moment in time.
Correct. And I can never determine whether you're a good or faithful servant.
Because I don't have enough perspective to do that.
I don't have enough perspective, not just from time, but like from quantity of like interaction and whatnot. That's why God is the only one that does it.
Yeah, that's why I said I don't sit in the seat of condemnation, but I sit in the seat of judgment all the time.
It's kind of like
I'm not here to condemn you, but I do keep my eyes.
But I will judge you. I just won't pronounce sentence on you. What is
But
that?
isn't that what judgment is? Pronouncing sentence?
It's
That is
just
what
yeah.
judgment is.
Was
No,
that?
Judgment is sentencing.
It's
I
sense.
keep my
Yeah, that's
eyes
true.
open. I'm not going to condemn
Well, at least
you and say,
determination of guilt anyway. May not be
It's
sentencing.
more determination of guilt, and then condemnation is like the act of.
I just take notes. That's all I do.
I don't see how we could be advised or admonished to be wise as serpents, harmless as doves if we're not exercising some sort of judgment. When you exercise judgment and not, if you see an officer,
Mhm.
you don't speed up when you see him. That's exercising judgment. Well, unless you just
Good
have
judgment.
that you want to give.
Good judgment.
You know what I mean, right?
Yeah, I got you.
So this misnomer that we can't exercise. I mean, you'll know a tree by their fruits, right? It's like if you see a dude comes home, Kendrick, you have daughters, right?
2.
Right. Some dude shows up looking like, little baby or the baby, whatever it is now.
It's both.
He's
It's
like,
both.
yeah, I
Both
want
sides.
to take. You're gonna exercise some judgment.
I
But-
probably
but-
will, but if somebody comes looking at Carlton Banks, I'm gonna exercise judgment too.
But that's
This family can't protect her.
He just
Go ahead, bring the baby. I need to protect it.
Right? Long enough for her to run away. That's
But yes, no, I hear you. I hear you.
But a bad servant, I agree that we can't make those kind of judgments. A bad servant does not necessarily. So my thought was, if, like I mentioned before, where we want the hows that are notable, the ones that get the accolades, the one that work. And so when we're doing our hows and we're like, yeah, this is not my work. Like, it's got to be something else, nobler or whatever. But when you go and like, especially particularly for people who have multiple gifts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your how is A, but you're good at B and C. And you're like, it's got to be one of these ones because these are nobler than this one.
Oh, I
So
like this better than that one.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so by you doing B and C, aren't you be a bad servant? Because he told you A. He wants you to do A.
Oh,
You're
absolutely.
good at C,
I
but
like the
that's
word
not.
unfaithful, but yes.
Well, okay. So unfaithful is
A bad servant.
Yeah.
because it's all most times he like, well, God, didn't I do X, Y, Z? And he's like,
That's not what I asked of you. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, I just Cyrus kind of mixed me up this week. Mixed me up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You think about the people God is using as looking a certain way. They look like Abraham, and they look like, Moses. Cyrus don't look like none of them, But then you come across Balaam and Jethro and these other cats who clearly was with God.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about, well, how is God moving, and how is he dealing with people, and to another side tangential question, not tangential question that we're going to answer, but it's more of a rhetorical question. Do people actually hear from God, if they're not reading the Bible, and this path, along this path, is God actually dealing with people if they're not in this sphere? And you look at Cyrus and you say, yeah, clearly,
Mm-hmm.
clearly he is.
Mm-hmm.
Jethro was a priest of Midian. Clearly he was.
So it's funny. I was playing golf with this dude one time.
You just play golf again, man? Another time?
Yeah. So
There you go.
not recently. It's been cold, but I was playing golf with this dude. I mean, he was just talking about just smashing, just rampage, and then like one time didn't start talking about how God talks to him about doing this and like how he spoke a word and this person spoke a word, and I'm just like, yo, I'm like, none of this stuff matches up. That's it.
Right?
It didn't. None of it matched up. Like I was like, this puzzle's not fitting the way it's supposed to. He was sincere in both. he was just as sincere about smashing as he was about speaking a word into this person, and
It's a
the
passion.
person and how the person received the word. Like, and I was just like, this doesn't make sense. But I was just like, yo, it's not mine to figure out.
Yeah.
Um,
But does it make you more sensitive to receive it?
does it make me what?
More apt to receive it if it's coming to you from these unlikely spaces?
What it did, absolutely, yes. Yeah. But what it also did was kind of like what this conversation was, and it just kept reminding me like just continue talking to me and I will let you know whether or not this is and right. And then part of it's just also just being there and having the conversations. It's also like, clearly this dude is comfortable to tell me both. Right, and be comfortable to tell me both, and we can have conversations about, and so I think there's value in that as well. But it was also like just let me discern, and I will tell you where you should do, what you should do, how you should view this, if you should be like no, whatever it is, right? And so I keep stressing to myself and to my girls to I mean, the Holy Spirit is like that's the it, because I don't have the power to discern any other way.
That's right. I'm just saying, man, if somebody's having a conversation with me talking about smashing and all this other stuff and then switches over and tells me how good God is and I need to come to this church because this pastor is transforming his life, I'm probably not going.
Yeah. But
Depends if you're single or not. Like
but
that singles ministry might be on fire.
The key is that he said the pastor's transforming his life.
Isn't that like the lady at the well though?
Tell me more. I'd like to hear more of that.
Isn't that like the lady who was doing what had the man at her house that wasn't her husband, and she came running and telling people, "Let me."
I met another man.
That's what she said.
Hey, he's even better than the last. All of them.
They're thinking that, like, oh, here we go.
Like, here we go again.
Yeah.
Like here he is. So if you had judged her in that moment, I'm pretty sure a lot of people didn't take her seriously and didn't know
absolutely.
No, but hers was more of a, hey, come see a man who I believe. Like, I just met this person. I'm saying, if the person was telling me that their pastor was transforming their life, like they were sitting under him, that he was transforming their life, but their conversation was about conquest.
Right. I don't think it's different. Because nothing happens immediately, right? There's a lot of us that struggle with different things. Okay. And God is continuing to do his work that he's doing in us. And if anybody had picked a moment of hearing you on Water for the Thirsty say, God is great and blah, 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 and then saw you doing something, would have been like, nah, this dude's not serious about life. You know what I mean? So if anybody takes any moment from any of us, me or anyone else, they can come to those kind of conclusions if they really wanted to,
Yep.
based off of a moment or even a phase in your life. It may not even just be one thing. Like you might have been struggling with whatever for an extended period of time, but that work was still being done.
Mm-hmm.
You
Or
know
it
what I'm saying?
may not even be a
we gotta-
struggle. We might say something reverent, and then we might pull it out. Jesus loved them hoes, and they'll be like, huh? I'm just saying.
we all have the ultimate get out of jail pass.
But he does.
He does.
I
man.
know, but
All you gotta do is say, God is working on me.
But no, Chris, to be fair, that was the comments about the people that Jesus was hanging with when he was here.
How so?
Matthew was robbing people blind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the same day he leave and was robbing people blind, he went by Jesus. Jesus went by him to eat and line. And the people was like, why are you hanging out with this? He is a well-known bandit.
Mm-hmm.
He's a thief who's rob people and take advantage of people. And he working for the man. You understand?
And he said,
Out with him.
But he
That
changed.
was a moment in time.
But he was changing.
I came for sick, dog.
Exactly. God was working on him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it was the same day. Yeah.
Okay.
And so
I see what
guess
you're saying.
I guess I'm in the camp there with Lorraine in that this guy might be talking perhaps, because it's so complex. People are so complex. He might be talking about smashing in this instance where he might have come down from where he used to be. Right? Where he was before in terms of his transformation, he wasn't just smashing, he was taking money and charging money. Right? Now you don't charge him money anymore.
Smashing pockets.
Right? So he's moved. So there is this transformation that's happening.
So there's truth in his statement. I got you.
He no longer has his OnlyFans. He's now just
wow.
No.
just regular followers now. I got you.
And that
He's
is
on
a
some
testament
fans.
to the transformation, right? The pastor is transforming his life.
Right.
With that, I will retract my
but
statement.
now I can halfway see. Right?
Right.
And I'm not saying, and Cliff, I'm not saying that there are not times, not situations where you're right.
Yes, we're not saying that either.
right.
No, I got you. I got it. But I'll still retract my statement. I'll hold on to it for a little longer.
Like I said, I just take note. That's all I do. I just take note of characteristics and things and just store it away in my brain somewhere in the back.
Listen, in this business that I'm in, I make statements like this when we're on here, man, because it's funny and it provokes thought and stuff. But in this business that I'm in, man, you can't never assume anything about people. Period.
Nope.
You have to
and I was
always,
like, in yours,
you have to
you don't pronounce judgment on people in your business.
No, never, man, never. Because like you said, people are complex.
Absolutely.
One of the things that if people like, and I was just talking to my man the other day. I was just talking to Cliff, and he was like, if people come up to you and they say, hey, I want to get into this field. One of the first questions you ask them is, why do you want to get into this field? And if folks say, because I always wanted to help people or whatever have you, say, okay, it can't just be about that. It's got to be more than that, because people are going to disappoint you. People are going to chew you up and spit you out. People are going to lie to you. People are going to do a whole bunch of things that's going to destroy that spirit of help. So it's got to be more than that. You got to give me more than that. And because that's people. And people have to go through stuff. They got to go through hurt. You heard the term hurting people, hurt people. You got to get through all of that to actually find out people before they may let you in. Then you have,
and that might be year 5.
It could be. It absolutely could be. There are people that I'm working with that I've been working with for a while that have just started to crack. But I love it.
That's
so,
God.
Yeah,
That's who God is with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when you look at it that way, man, we have these conversations, but my thought is always, I'm gonna leave it up to God. Not unless it impacts me in a negative way. Then I have to make a judgment call on how it's going to affect me and my family. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But other than that, it's but I don't have time to really because it could be a number of things going on.
So were
Well, the
we
thing
saying
is that so in your story, like your story about raising Canaan, like what you did was when it affected you, you addressed you.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't go back to him and be like, "Yo, this is what it did." So you know you shouldn't do this, da, 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 because right you
Well,
addressed it with you. That was between you and God,
mm-hmm.
and you were convicted on that, and God convicted you on that. Then that's you,
Mm-hmm.
and you give God room to deal with whatever else He's gonna do elsewhere,
That's it, man.
Unless
That's
he
it.
gives you
unless He
unless he
calls
gives
you
you
to say something.
instructions to
Correct.
participate in something else.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
so were we saying earlier I had stepped away. Were we saying the what of Courtney's question is directly given to you?
That's what we
Is that
that's
where
what
y'all
we
landed?
concluded. Yes, that's where we kind of landed. We might want to revise it, but based on what we've seen, yes.
Directly given
And it
how?
may not be a clear. We use Joseph where you know you could look at it and look the dreams that he had when he was younger. You can construe it a certain way, but when you blow it up, it was. I think Jared said it perfectly. It was leadership, right? It was a
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
like you were going to be put into a leadership position. Now you can misconstrue that what at that time because it just showed, it was the dream replicated him and his brothers and his parents,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
but clearly it was going to be more than that as you saw the thing play out. But at least there's a form of the what that existed.
So
Right.
until God gives you a what are you?
Ah, I love it because that's where I was about to go.
Mm.
That's where I was about to go. Moses didn't get a Moses. What was kind of informed before, according to the way the story is written, God had decided Moses' word from before, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't become aware of it till when?
To Moses, what?
To the
Mm-hmm.
bush.
To the bush.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I'm gonna fuck
And
that.
he was how old by then?
80?
Like 80, right?
Yeah, yeah. He was 80 years old by the time he got his what? A specific one. Now, that's why I think it was important for us to have the conversation about the servants.
Mm-hmm.
Because a servant just kind of does what's asked of him until he's given a special assignment.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's what, in the meantime, we're good and faithful servants to whatever is in front of us, whatever he's assigned to us or entrusted us with or made us responsible for.
Mm.
I would
You notice?
also add that thanks to the New Testament, there is a large scale mandate to be a witness that is on all of us who have accepted Christ. And so, if we're faithful in that until we get our burning bush experience,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that's kind of why God was able to come to Moses, because he was in a posture of servant, being a servant, while he was in Midian, that God was
To
able to say, "Hey,
Jethro.
servant, I want to call you up to do this," you know, um, and so I that's what would be my contribution to that question.
Mm.
So default
Yeah,
setting is witness. Upgrade is when he gives you your specific
a
go and
specific
do.
power on that witness, maybe.
But look at the skills that you're building in the meantime. Like look at Moses being that shepherd in those years in between with Joseph. He's going through the system in the jail. I guess before that in Potiphar's house, but he's gaining a lot of skills and abilities as he's going. That's
Mm-hmm.
preparing him for that part.
Self
You know,
discipline also. Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime, he just had to be faithful servant. He was a
right?
faithful servant, and that allowed him to get the skills. And why God was able to say, "Okay, you go into jail school now. Right? I can send you to jail school because I know you'll be a faithful servant in jail school and get what it is I need to get for you to develop."
Mm-hmm.
in order to
Right.
actually do this thing over here. But I can't tell you all in front because if I tell you all in front, it's likely going to impact the ability
Mm.
to function. You know.
I'm gonna send you to jail school.
Right.
Not that you did anything wrong and deserve to be there, but because I need you there for a purpose and to teach you at the same time.
To learn
Set you
there.
up for a higher purpose.
That's undivided attention right there.
Woo! Ooh, boy.
And he thought he was going to get out. And then it's like, nah.
Bruh.
You know, at some point, and I don't want to prolong. I'm sorry, I hate to prolong this, but at some point, I wonder about the disappointment sometimes because it's kind of like, yo, surely you'll remember me when, when these things come to pass and you get before the king to mention my name.
Nope.
Nope. I still got to stay here for a while. Oh
And
my
you don't
God.
know how long. You don't
Or
know
not
what-
even while. Like that at that point, you're like, I'm never getting out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
At some point, it's just no
man,
longer
God,
school.
help me
You're like, you're
reveal this
just
dream to you, and
You're a
surely
professional
you will
student,
mention
right?
my
It's
I
name.
not
keep getting held back.
Yeah. Yeah.
When is graduation?
Yeah.
Like, nah.
Get me out of this school. I'm telling you. Oh my goodness, yeah. All right.
He probably regretting everything. Like, man, I should never told my brothers and them nothing. Like,
I ain't never going to sleep again.
Courtney, I
dreams.
believe that he had to go through those trials right there, man, to
Yeah.
come to become the good and faithful servant that
Yeah.
he was. You
Yeah.
what? I believe you work those things out, man. You fuss and you argue with God sometimes, and he just got to be like, yeah, go ahead, get it out. You still gonna be there for a
I'm sure
minute.
he would have liked to go to a different type of school. Though.
Yes.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure he would have liked a more traditional learning environment. I'm sure.
But here's the thing. Here's the beautiful thing about it. He had to meet the people that he needed to meet to affect the change that God wanted in them. He had to meet Potiphar because he had to change Potiphar's concept about God and everything else around it. You know what I'm saying? He had to go to jail to meet the people that he met in jail. He had to meet the butcher and the baker. I mean, the cup baker, the butcher and the baker, candlestick maker. He had to meet the baker and the cupbearer. You know what I'm saying? He had to meet these specific people and do these specific tasks because good and faithful servant at the moment was doing his faithful service. God was using him, albeit it may not have been the way that he wanted to see it or wanted it to happen.
Yeah.
But God was still using it.
And I'm
He was
sure
working through to the end to affect the dream, the outcome of the dream.
And I'm sure the word spread too, because when he went to jail, I'm sure Potiphar was, shared with whoever was in charge, like, it's a good man. Like
You said what?
But my
I
wife.
feel like he had to tell somebody that, hey, look out for him, because he's
He's a good
not.
man, but my wife.
But
Yeah.
yeah. Like,
Happy wife, happy life.
Goodness,
I don't
goodness,
do something.
goodness.
So Lauren, I want to circle back quickly to the witnessing.
One second, Jared. Keep that thought. Have you done any research to find out if Potiphar's wife was a high official of some sort or whatever? Because that's a lot of power. That was a lot of power she wielded.
She was his wife. That was a lot of
it
power.
wasn't that kind of power.
Be like, you're married.
Power.
That was a lot of power.
That kind of
You
power.
are married.
Um,
You know
I mean,
you know that power.
Just look at Sarah. Get that woman and her child out of my house.
Yeah,
No.
right. Yes. Yes.
Power. so much power that God said, do what your wife says, please.
Yeah. Oh goodness.
Yeah, God was just like, yeah.
God was like, I don't need the aggravation.
God was like, I'll just deal with Israel and Palestine for the next 6,000.
Yeah,
I'd rather
that-
deal with that
man.
than deal with this right now.
Yep.
Go ahead, brother. I'm sorry. I ain't
I
want.
just want to say, witnessing is a simple concept. It is sharing an experience that you had firsthand. And so as as you serve as a faithful servant of God, just being responsible for the things that you've had, you are sharing what that experience is like with the people you come in contact with. And then you get that would then kind of define your house. As Jerry pointed out, you will find that God is going to start putting people in your path for whom the experience that you just had or are still having would become beneficial. And then you share in that space. Sometimes it may involve a Bible study, but sometimes it may just be, yo, this is how I dealt with this situation because of my faithfulness to God led me to deal with it this way, and this is the outcome, and this is how it blessed me, or this is how it benefited me, and this is what I learned about God. And that's one of the things that we see about Joseph, as we use his story in particular, was his faithfulness as a servant bore witness to God. And we even come back to Jesus. Jesus's work was to reveal the Father. Now, how did he reveal the Father? Healing the sick, raising the dead, speaking the word, all of them kind of things, walking on water, calming the storm was how he revealed the Father. But that was his work was simple, to reveal the Father, and he understood it. And the how became shaped by that witness that he came to bear. So I think that is one thing that someone who is waiting on a burning bush experience can do, and maybe the only thing that he's asking of some people, so I just wanted to add that to that thought. All right, we are at 10:07. So I think we should start closing up with our takeaways, because we talked about a number of things that all did neatly interlock and relate to one another. But what we're going home with was the takeaway. I will start with you, Courtney, since it was your question, and we come back around to Lorraine.
Man, y'all was preaching. Yeah, man. I guess I'm just taking away, not to get caught up in the how. Just be obedient. I'd say not worry about the how. Let God take care of the how. You know what I mean? You just take that step and continue to make the steps, whatever He's asking you to do each moment.
Good. How about you, Cliff?
I am simply going to take good and faithful servant. That's going to be my takeaway. I'm thinking about me in that title right there. Good and faithful servant. Where am I when it comes to being there? That's going to be my takeaway.
Good. Eric?
Stay employed. Just be employed and wait and just do what you're supposed to do. I mean, I thought what you said was powerful in that you just keep, you do what you're supposed to do. Like you fulfill the demands and requests until you receive the thing that you are there for. But you have to be employed. So choose to be employed.
Got you. I'll go next since I'm up from Kenrick. Good servant, bad servant, all servant. I think it was the momentary. You can't judge the faithfulness of a servant in a moment, for good or for bad. And just because someone did a contract work doesn't necessarily make them a faithful servant, but they could be a servant nonetheless. However, what's important for me is, am I a good and faithful servant in the moment and over time, and trying to strive towards that. is where I'm going to take away. Jerry?
I think I'm with Courtney. Keep your ears attentive to the what, and don't get distracted or too focused on the how. I actually think I'm living that. I've been living that for the past several months. So yeah.
Lorraine?
Sorry, I have to write it down. Jail school.
Yes, sir.
My thought was your how will not always be comfortable or glamorous. People may talk about your character. You may not be received well, but be unwavering in your partnered mission with God. Be not weary in doing well, for in due season you will reap. Thanks.
Preacher.
Dang, she said unwavering.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? You get the honor of blessing us tonight in prayer. Those kind of words there.
Girl,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
you
ready
better
for
write.
my blessing.
You
I'm
better
ready.
read that prayer.
Ready for my blessing.
You better
Oh
use unwavering.
Lord. Okay.
Do it for Jesus.
Yeah.
Lord, thank you for allowing us to gather. Thank you for anyone that's tuned in. I pray that what we talked about today reached out to all that it needed to reach out to, whether it be a reminder or a thought that was planted, a seed that was planted. Lord, we may not know what our efforts are in our discussions. We may not know the impact, but I ask that it will do what you intended for it to do. And I ask that our individual lives will do what you intended it to do as well. I pray that at the end of all of this, you will say, well done, good and faithful servant. In Jesus' name I do pray. Amen.
Amen.
Man.
Amen.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your contribution, conversation, and your thoughts. We are on again, first Friday in December, and then again, third Friday in December. And then that's it for the year 2022. And we start again, beginning January, start the Bible all over again and go through for another cycle, ending our 9th year in in August. So
Mm-hmm.
looking forward to that.
Also, I realized we didn't pay attention to anything. The comments on
Takeaways.
yeah, I
No,
didn't
oh, I didn't. I missed this one though. I did miss
yeah.
this. You can't recognize it if you don't have some of the cast review about that servant is. Yep. All right. Yeah. So if you have not already got a copy of the reading plan, download it from waterforthethirsty.com, from the App Store, from Google Play. If you like hard copies, email us. Email us at info@waterforthethirsty.com. We'll be sure to organize a hard copy for you. And if you would like to join the conversation and be a tile on the screen from wherever you are, hit me at info@waterforthethirsty.com. We can make that
Mm-hmm.
happen. We'd love to have additional voices and perspectives, and all are welcome. Well, up to 10, but in any given session. But we could schedule, for people there. All right. I guess until the next time we meet, drink up, stay thirsty, drink up.
Drink up.
Drink
Stay
up,
thirsty, my friends. Really.
drink deeply. All right, we go on there later.
Blessings.